After 39 hours in game, 145 total, max leveling each Astro Operator and weapon, and playing for the last 4 months, here are my thoughts on Boundary Early Access. First things first, I just want to say, the game is fun. 6 Degrees of Freedom creates more opportunities for routes and pathways, and it has a ton of potential. But its future depends on the execution during the remainder of Early Access. The foundations for the most part are there, it's just the devs need to build upon that foundation. Let me explain what I mean. I'm going to do so by going through different categories and giving a score for each, and at the end I'll average all of them together to get an overall score. Firstly, I gotta talk about movement. Movement for me is an 8 out of 10. It's nice when you understand it, but there's some room for improvement. Like I said before, the 6 Degrees of Freedom can create a lot of opportunities and creative ways to get around the map. Next up, let's talk about the gunplay. When your shots are hitting, gunplay is really nice and enjoyable. However, when your shots aren't hitting, gunplay can feel like a chore, and it feels like you have to work a lot harder to get the same result. And what I mean is not just having your aim hit or not. I feel like when you have higher ping, your shots just don't register half the bullets, so instead of laying, let's say, 5 bullets in, you have to shoot 10. That being said, I give it an 8 out of 10 when it's hitting, and a 5 out of 10 when they're not. Let's talk about map design. Map design for me was a 5 out of 10. To me, the maps were enjoyable for early access, but they did have their problems. Those problems mostly being around the spawns and the spawn systems rather than the layout though. I would love to see more diverse and interactive maps moving forward, Dusty being a good example in that. If more maps are added and they have the same feeling as the current ones, I will be disappointed. Speaking of disappointed, balancing. Balancing was a 4 out of 10 so far for me. I get the devs are dialing things in instead of doing big nerfs, but I feel like there should be more tweaks to get that balance between operators and weapons if that's the case. Following the trend, available content also gets a 4 out of 10 for me. It started out being okay as a baseline, but aside from the one weapon, one map, and a handful of limited time mode, not much has been added. In my opinion, I feel like they're being far too conservative with what they're trying out in early access, rather opting to save it for full release. For example, store, battle pass, and console release, I feel like should have some type of version that's tested in early access before full release. Let's talk about the learning curve. The learning curve for movement isn't bad, however, the tutorials are the only source of information about things in game, and not everything is covered in those. Learning movement isn't difficult, but the lack of explanation on pods, equipment, gadgets can lead to confusion. That being said, I give it a 5 out of 10. Last but not least, let's talk about my personal experience. My experience with the game makes me want to continue playing if getting consistent games was possible, which at the moment, it's not. I've enjoyed learning the ins and outs of the game and recently even been told there's a world of difference between what I've seen and played against versus how other regions play. If this were 2 months ago, I would have recommended picking up the game 9 times out of 10. However, that's a hard justification for other people to do based off the player base. I'm rating my personal experience a 7 out of 10 with the game so far. Overall, adding everything up together and only factoring in the good gunplay, it comes out to only be a 6 out of 10, which it's very possible to get it bumped up to an 8 out of 10 with some changes. So, where do we go from here? I would love to see the player population grow back to a decent size so that the devs can continue to prepare the game for full release, but that being said, I cannot see that happening without some changes. I plan on making a longer video talking about all the changes I would love to see, but here's my short list for the remainder of early access. First thing on my wish list will be a free weekend and console test combo. I feel like getting the game in the hands of players who've been waiting to play it for such a long time will not only revive the player base, but also give access to data for the devs to work with. But you have to have content, which I'll get into next. You have to have more content in the game, whether that be new game modes, new guns, stuff that we already have seen. We have to have more. That actually leads me to the next section, which is custom games in a workshop. I know the devs need time to work on content and make sure it's published and ready for the game. However, if you give us access to custom games in the workshop, we can help keep the game alive. Custom games will have us have more consistent games and maybe bring community games back, and workshop can bring new maps, new modes, maybe new guns that can eventually get added to the game, maybe. Part of me really wants the workshop just because I've seen a lot of stuff on ArtStation that looks really good that I would love to see in Boundary. Speaking of which, I've also seen content that should be in Boundary, but it's not. For example, there's locked attachments, there's locked skins that, are just hidden. There's skins that are not hidden but still locked. Like, why can't we have the stuff that we know exists available in the game? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Just make it available unless they're holding it for full release, which again I feel like they're being very conservative if that is the case. Anyway, before I get in a giant rant, I just want to wrap it up. The last thing I want is just more communication, either from the devs or the community team. I just want to know what's going on, not fully like, oh, they're working on this and this, but like, we're supposed to get a roadmap and we still don't have it. Like, we're just in the complete dark, and the game kind of died over the last couple months without us knowing exactly what they were working on. I would just love to know something, just so that way I can think about it, but there's nothing to be hype about because there's no communication. Anyway, those are my thoughts on early access 4 months in. I'm hoping for the best in the next at least 2 months, because they said 6 to 12 months, and 6 months is coming up quick. Would love to see the player base get revived and have a lot more stuff ready, but who knows. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy the video. If you have any comments, concerns, doubts, anything you're holding faith in, leave it down in the comment section. Really want the game to succeed, long story short. But anyway, hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one.